Does it really matter which power tubes are in your guitar amplifier when it comes to modern, high-gain tones? Let's find out. So today we're going to have some fun and do a little bit of research. Now keep in mind, I'm not an amp builder, I'm not an amp tech. So if you have an informed opinion and have anything to add on this matter, please drop a comment in the comment section down below. And of course, to the rest of you, I'd love to know your thoughts as well. Now, today we are going to compare the sound of EL34 tubes versus 6L6 tubes, just focused on modern rock and metal guitar tones, basically. Now, I've heard this plenty of times. People saying like, I prefer, EL34 amps because they have more bark. EL34 tubes have more crang. And EL34 tubes simply sound more British. While other people might say 6L6 tubes are better because they sound more American. 6L6 tubes are better because they are more smooth, and 6L6 tubes are better because they are more creamy sounding. But the question is, are those characteristics really because of how the tubes sound, or does it have more to do with how the amplifiers, so the preamp and or the power amp, are voiced? Now today I'm going to use this amplifier for this comparison. This is my Zuta GBG120, a really nice amplifier. Love this thing a lot. You've probably seen it on my channel. I did a review on it and some other videos. Definitely check those out. Anyway, this is a 120 watt amplifier, 4 channels, all that good stuff. And it has 4 power tubes, 2 of them being EL34s and 2 of them being 6L6s. So we have this AB mode over here. That's the 120 watt mode, which has all 4 tubes active, so a blend between 6L6 and EL34 tubes. And then we have the A mode, which is 6L6s, and the B mode, which is EL34s. And that is cool because this allows us, to do a comparison and to see how these tubes actually differ in tone. And for this test, I'm using my Valiant Jupiter guitar, and I'm using channel 3 for a nice, modern, high-gain tone with plenty of mids. I did make it a little bit of a bright tone, so we have a little bit of intelligibility there, but, plenty of chunk going on. No post-processing, so I'm not going to do, any high-pass filtering or anything like that. We're just going to hear the guitars by themselves. And what we're going to do first, and this is important, first we're going to do a blind test. And before we start, think in your head, like, this is how I think an EL34 sounds like, and this is how I think a 6L6 sounds like. And then when we're doing the blind test, just really listen closely and think, okay, oh, right, I hear those characteristics here. So number 1 must be this tube. Number 3 must be this tube, because we're doing 3. We're going to do, the EL34s by themselves, the 6L6s by themselves, and we're also going to do the A-B mode with both tubes combined. And let's see if we can hear the difference, And don't skip ahead first. Let's just do this blind test and see if we can, hear the difference purely by listening, okay? Have fun and good luck. right, that was interesting, right? So there was a little bit of a difference. 1 and 2 sounded very similar to my ears. Maybe number 1 was a little bit more crispy up top, and 2 seemed to be a little bit more girthy in the low mids. The difference is subtle indeed. I mean, there was a little bit of a difference, but is that a difference that you could consider, you know, an important difference or very noticeable? Let me know, because we all hear things differently, right? I mean, if you're working on tube amplifiers the entire day, being an amp tech, you'll probably hear more of a difference than most regular players. But I did hear that number 3 was a little bit darker sounding and a little bit more smooth sounding. So which one could that be, right? Okay, so now I'm going to do the reveal, show you guys which one was which, and then we'll talk a little bit about that afterwards. Check it out. All right, interesting, right? So number 1 were the 6L6s, number 2 were the EL34s, and number 3 was AB, so both tubes combined. And obviously, number 3 was the smoothest sounding, which was a little bit surprising to me since that mode does have more headroom, right? That's the 120 watt mode. Now again, the difference between the 6L6s and the EL34s seems to be quite subtle, but I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. But perhaps other power tubes like KD88s or KD77s or whatnot have a more drastic difference. I don't know. Now I would like to note, and I know that you're going to ask, like, why not push those power tubes, right? Well, I think that in modern music and high gain tones especially, which is what we're focusing on today, you know, a guitar amp relies more on the preamp rather than the power amp. So those modern amplifiers are designed to let the preamp shine and breathe. And in order to get them, you know, to saturate and to push those power tubes really hard, you're going to have to crank those amplifiers up really hard. And in my experience, when you do that, you know, the sound just gets more muffled and compressed. So when you push a power tube really hard, you're just going to make the tone darker and a little bit more flubby. You're basically killing the headroom in those cases. So that's why I focused on a normal level tone, relying primarily on the preamp for the sound. So I think that those modern amplifiers like this one, you know, they rely on the tone much more on the preamp rather than on the power amp. With a very vintage amplifier like a Plexi or something, which I can't crank in this house, it might be different. But again, this was more focusing on modern high gain tones, which is what most of you who watch this channel are interested in anyway. Now, I have actually discussed this topic with some amp builders in the past, and what they basically told me is that certain amplifiers are voiced or designed with certain power tubes in mind. And say, for example, you have a 6L6 amplifier where you decide to swap those power tubes out for EL34s. In some cases, people will hear a difference. It might sound different, right? But that could be because of the fact that that amplifier from which you swapped the power tubes out was voiced for those specific tubes. And that's where the sound difference comes from in that case, because apparently, you know, power tubes don't sound all that different. At least not in a context like this. But I hope the amp techs will correct me if I'm wrong. And of course, also let me know what your thoughts are, guys, on the differences between the tone in this particular comparison. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please drop a like and subscribe down below, so that really helps the channel out. You can also buy something in my affiliate links for Thomann and Sweetwater or Tube Amp Doctor. That really helps the channel out at no additional cost for you guys. I'd really appreciate that. You can also get something at my web store, like a capture pack or IRs. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Cheers.